welcome to another episode of The Buzzer Race. I'm your host, Nikhil Ranjan.
And I'm your co-host, Zhang.
And for our guest today, we have Issy Arroyo, the captain of California's 2020 NJCL Advanced Certamen team. Welcome, Issy.
Hi.
So could you kind of just do a brief introduction of yourself, some background information, and then can you tell us your favorite celebrity?
My name's Issy Arroyo. I'm from the California Junior Classical League. I've been playing Certamen since I've first started Certamen in 8th grade. I've been playing regularly since 10th grade. And I've been on the national team 2 years in a row, as well as some invitationals. If I had to choose, it would probably be an all-way tie between all the members of Monty Python.
Oh, okay. That is a solid choice, honestly. That's pretty funny. I mean, I think the first time I saw Monty Python was probably 7th grade or something, and that was an experience, to say the least.
All a work of art.
Yeah. And so I mean, with that, I think we can just kind of jump right in. And you mentioned already briefly that you started Certamen in 8th grade, although competitively in 10th. Do you want to kind of tell us how you got into Latin as a whole?
There were a number of reasons. One of which was my friend was taking it, and I thought it was cool because we were going to a new school together, and I wanted to have a class with her. Another one is that my grandfather was a Latin scholar when he was young, and I really wanted to kind of flex on the rest of the family by being able to write him letters that no one else would understand. So those were the two reasons I started, and then once I got there, it was just no looking back ever. I just clicked with it. It was the most amazing class. I knew in a week that I was taking Latin forever.
Nice. That's awesome. I mean, I think it's always interesting to hear how people get into Latin. I think usually seems to be maybe a friend or some family member has some influence on why you decided to do it. So that's really cool. So you got into Latin that way. But how did you get into Certamen and the JCL? Because those aren't always exactly connected in some schools.
Well, I was really lucky to have at the time a teacher. I mean, shout out to Dr. Hansen. She was very passionate about the JCL. We didn't have a huge chapter. Our chapter wasn't super involved. We only went to regionals. But I went to my first SCRAM in 7th grade, and I joined the Latin club, and it was the best thing ever. I think my favorite thing, my first one was the mythological spelling bee. Not my favorite anymore, but I actually tried Certamen and I didn't like it very much. But it wasn't until 10th grade when I actually took over the club and became its president that I realized I started getting all the emails about events, and I was like, wait, there's more than just regionals? I didn't realize that till 10th grade, so I started going to invitational Certamen. And that was when I got into it competitively.
Neat. That's interesting that your first kind of taste wasn't exactly you weren't really into it. I think usually people are oh, I was hooked from the beginning, never stopped. But that's neat to hear. So you mentioned something called SCRAM. I don't know if I heard you properly.
Oh my goodness, not Californians. I'm so sorry. SCRAM, Southern California Regional Amici Madness. It is our convention in Southern California.
Could you kind of tell us about that? That sounds really interesting.
It's in the fall. This one is on November 21st, so go to it virtually. But it is just it's always hosted at a school in Southern California. I don't know much about regionals at other states, so this might be familiar information. There's mythological spelling bee, there's open Certamen, arts and crafts stuff. It's just a mini state, and it's very fun.
That's super neat. So who's putting on SCRAM? Is it SCLers, teachers, a mix?
I think SCLers help with it. SCLers help run it. There are definitely teachers involved, and I honestly don't know. I know that as an SCLer now, I'm involved. We're making plans for SCRAM, but it's basically just a smaller version of state.
So when does state take place in respect to this? So this, you said, occurs around November. Does it occur around November every year?
Yeah.
Okay. So when does state take place for California?
We tend to have state in the spring.
Okay.
So we have, I think in the last years it's been March and April.
Okay. I mean, that's similar to Texas at any rate. I don't know too much about other states. Alan, is Ohio like that, where you have?
Yeah, we have like a fall forum around October and November, which I'd say kind of sounds comparable to SCRAM, and then we have state convention also around March. So
Okay, that's pretty neat. So is Scram kind of used as like I guess used sounds really maybe bad undertone, but does it have like, is it kind of like to introduce people like in like a very gentle way to like JCL? Is that kind of the idea?
Is it a recruiting ground? Yes.
Okay.
I would think so. It definitely was what got me hooked. Because again, the only reason I didn't start going to state was because I didn't know it existed. So I just thought the extent of the JCL was regional conventions. But it was such a, well, can't believe I was about to call a regional JCL convention a gateway drug, but it was definitely like that. And when I got people in my, when I started running Latin Club, I would always try to get people to sign up for SCRAM because I didn't want to, I felt like state would be too competitive in introduction, or like it might dissuade some people who weren't super strong yet. Whereas SCRAM, it's like it has a much more local feel. It's very friendly. Not that state isn't, but.
No, yeah, that's super cool. I mean, like, I think that type of like intro kind of regional like event, I don't know if that occurs very much elsewhere. Like that's the first time I've ever heard of something like that. I think I've heard a bunch of fall forums, but this sounds like a very fun thing that I think I probably would have enjoyed going to too, especially like, someone starting Latin. It sounds like a lot of fun. So you have Scram, and so that kind of pulls you into Latin and to the JCL as a whole. But we still had like a year or two before you got into Certamen, and then from then on, once you were the president and stuff, you stuck with it. So what kind of kept you in with Certamen? Like, was it being just like the president? It's like, oh, I need to do this, or what kind of like led to that?
Well, I mean, between starting, if I understand correctly, between the first conventions I went to and when I actually started playing competitively, I mean, I always loved Latin. It was always first and foremost about the language for me, but also I loved taking the National Latin exam, so that kind of kept me involved outside of conventions. And also I competed in the NJCL creative writing contest for years. So that was kind of how I kept my hand in competition-wise. So I actually won that in 8th, 9th, and 10th grade.
Oh wow, that is pretty impressive to just do that, back to back to back. Wow, that's kind of crazy. So
Fun time.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if I did not do too many contests outside of academics, which I kind of regret because they sound like a lot of fun. Like when I now hear about them and people are like, oh, I was doing this, I'm like, I don't know, I didn't do this.
I always feel like I should have started Certamen earlier. So.
Yeah, no, Certamen's a lot of fun. So you mentioned that you only really went to the regional competitions, and I was wondering if, like, what is the kind of like setup for the local scene in California? Like, do you have like a bunch of like invitationals hosted by maybe like a school or something throughout the year, or do you just kind of have this one regional competition?
There's definitely a lot of focus on the one regional competition. That is often the only thing I'll have in the fall. And then in the beginning of the winter or spring, there's usually like Crossroads School will have an invitational. That's usually fun. And then we have state, and then obviously like qualifiers for state Certamen. So, but outside of actual JCL run events, I don't know how this stacks up to other states, but I do know that on the East Coast, there's like Duke Certamen, Yale Invitational, all of that. We don't have as much of that, to my knowledge, although we did have, so when Stanford Certamen hosted their inaugural one last year, that was just so much fun because that was kind of a new experience, collegiate invitational. It was a fun time.
Yeah, so do you think those types of tournaments are good for the local scene? Like, are you hoping for like more of that to occur to kind of like help like keep it going? Because I feel like with like so few tournaments, I don't know much about the California JCL, so I mean, you totally weigh in on this and tell me if I'm completely wrong. But usually, the more like not too many tournaments, but if you have like a couple throughout the year, it keeps kids coming back and sometimes increases the number too. So are you hoping for Stanford Kurtamen to kind of keep going?
Oh, absolutely. I very much hope that Stanford will keep going. It was a great experience for me. I'd never seen Kurtamen done in an actual collegiate scene, in an actual classics department. Also, I really think it's important to have the invitationals like that on a more local level. So again, Crossroads Kurtamen. I don't know. I always wanted more JCL, but I feel like I could take competitions every weekend and be happy. So I might be in the minority on that. So, but I mean, of course, more would be better. But I think that California has a very high turnout for its states. So maybe the anticipation building is worth it.
Yeah, no, that's super neat. I mean, like, I think those types of invitationals are good usually for scenes, especially because there are so many. There seems to always be so many kids who are like, I want to keep competing. Like every weekend, just give me another Kurtamen round. I'll play it. That's neat. That's neat. So, kind of getting more into now, like you as a individual player. So you mentioned a lot of the times that you played solo. And I was curious, like, could you kind of tell us what it's like to play solo and also like how you approach studying for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So my JCL chapter was very small. And in 10th grade, I usually played on a team, but by 11th, our membership was dwindling a bit. There were rumors that my school was going to cut Latin, and those ended up being true. So I ended up playing alone a lot of the time because I was not willing to not go. And I actually went to state alone in 2019 and competed in the mini league alone. It's funny. It's always there are definitely trade-offs because I don't have to feel guilty that I'm out buzzing someone on my team who might know it. So I am like a hyper buzzing fiend when I am playing alone, more so than I am when I'm playing on a team. So it's actually a bit of a difficult adjustment when I switch back to being on a team, because I'm like, wait, I want to just buzz way in advance and have a reasonable chance of getting it right. But I also don't want to outbuzz someone who might have actually studied this part. I don't prefer either one. They both have their pros and cons. For studying, I just had to be a generalist with specialty in all categories. Was what I tried to be. But it was definitely tricky. I never studied for grammar because I didn't want to devote the time to it. I just never studied for grammar. I always counted school as that, but it was still one of my stronger categories. I poured a lot of myself into history and literature because that's a lot of, like, I just reviewed that constantly. Sometimes procrastinated my actual schoolwork with just like always literature and history. Yeah, it was just sort of plumbing into everything, reading books on my own time, anything by Edith Hamilton. It's obviously great.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. I mean, like, I think the generalist route is definitely, I mean, like, I guess obviously it's like the most taxing one. And, kind of letting Kurtamen studying and stuff getting in the way of schoolwork is a very relatable thing. That was almost my entire freshman year of high school. It's just like, oh, high school work, that can wait. That'll get done eventually. But yeah, no, that's super neat. So I'm kind of wondering, like, so you mentioned you played both on a team and also individually, and I'm wondering how you dealt with like competition stress in terms of like playing, and switching types of teams. I feel like if you switch, like, who you're playing with, as opposed to playing an individual, it can kind of change like a lot for how you feel when you're going into tournaments.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I mostly dealt with stress by preparing harder. I don't know, because usually I had no one else to like sort of put it on. But when I was on teams, it actually helped a lot with competition stress, because yes, there was that added layer of not wanting to outbuzz anyone, but like I remember when I played on the state team at 2019 nationals, it was like, wait, these are people I can like talk about the round with afterward in a way that other people will understand. Oh my god, this is so esoteric. This is, yeah. And then when I went to Stanford Certamen, I actually played with two people from different schools. We formed a like hybrid 3-person team, tribrid. Anyway, it was that was also really fun because we brought our kazoos, like brought the spirit to Stanford. But yeah, I definitely think that playing on a team helped with competition stress, whereas I kind of had to sort of adopt myself into other delegations to deal with competition stress when I was playing alone. But it was always fun either way. Everyone in the JCL is awesome.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's interesting to hear though, that like, having people, even though, as you mentioned, the like, oh, should I avoid buzzing or not, kind of factors in, but having people to talk, I think, about like, the material and what you just played is always a blast. You're like, oh my god, did you see that buzz? Like, what was that like? Did you know that? Like, where is this fact from? I think that's always like super fun, and I think it's really conducive to a good experience in Certamen. And so you played on the 2019 NJCL National Advanced Team for California, and then the 2021 as well as the captain this time around. I don't know if you were captain in 2019.
I was not captain in 2019.
Okay. So could you kind of like just walk us through those two nationals and that experience of playing, especially like at the advanced level at nationals, like what that was like working with your team members?
2019 nationals, that was, again, it was the first time in a very long time I had been on a team with other people. It was probably the first time when I was on a team with people I was like, who were very devoted to the subject. When I played on a team with people from my school, it was like, here are 3 people I like probably promised donuts to. I don't know, like they were, yeah, random recruits from my Latin class. So it was definitely a little bit intimidating when I first went to it, but and I was a little bit timid on the buzzer the first few questions when I realized like, oh, what if everyone else knows? And then I realized, no, I actually do know a few of these. So it was some adjustment, but it was a very fun time, very fun reintroduction to playing with other people. 2020, we ended up making semifinals in 2019. I think we got 8th place overall, which we were pretty happy with. It was, not a bad showing. I was very happy because it was my first time. This year, we had, last year we had 2 people who were slashers and 2 people, myself included, who were about to be seniors. This year we had 2 slashers and I believe 2 rising juniors. It was fun. It was good. I think that we did not make semifinals this year, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't know. We had a very difficult draw, but also I think that California has an interesting system where they decide their team at state or at nationals, so that it is drawn like very close to the actual competition. I think that if we picked a little bit earlier, we could practice together and maybe get a sense of everyone's strengths and weaknesses and become a more cohesive unit. But even without that, it was still a good time. We scored some points.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I think I was watching some of the rounds, and I remember, like, I think, what is it, round 3, y'all played, like, Wisco and Mass, and you still put up, I think, like, 70 points, which is, like...
Yes, that was, yeah.
I think that's pretty, like, I would say pretty good, especially considering, this type of system where, like, those teams have been, like, they are the same core people. They have been the same core people for, like, a year maybe or even longer. And y'all are like, oh, we kind of know our team now, like a week before Nats maybe, or some very short window before Nats. And it's like, you're still like performing at like a pretty high level. Like I think that's a good showing. And I mean, like making semis is always just such a like toss up.
Funny.
Oh, I actually didn't realize that I made that joke. I just now, when he said funny, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just unironically did that. But it really is, right? Because it's just it's draw dependent. It's like there's so much on like you either have to be at such a high level that like you are just unparalleled, or it just you kind of have to like just hope like you perform in every round at a certain level. Like I don't know. That's always the thing with like getting into semis for me. Has always been like it's such a dicey thing, which I guess is competition nature though. I guess that is the case. So I wanted to ask like how it was, because so 2019 was in Fargo, I believe that is the super famed Fargo Dome, but 2020 was online. What was that like for you moving from that nationals to your next one, just and I guess final one being online?
I mean, obviously it was disappointing when I first found out, because I have including the virtual ones, I have only been to 2 nationals. So I got my first taste of it in 2019, and I was very excited for the second one. But it was still a nice time. I did not feel too caught off guard by the Certamen format, because I had played in Michael Kearney's Certamen Mini League. We made, I believe, quarterfinals in that. I say we, it was me. It's representing my school. And then and then I also played in a California Invitational one that was over Discord, that was hosted by Harvard Westlake School in July. And that went very well. We were competing for a trophy that was shaped like a banana, and the winner was named California's Top Banana. We take ourselves very seriously here. So I was ready for the Certamen aspect in terms of like virtual setting. But it was still different psychologically, not to be in the room with other people, not to be feeling the same sort of jitters of like seeing everyone around you, having a judge in person. But I really think the NJCL did a great job adapting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you had a really great performance at nationals. I think that moreover, lots of your career in the JCL has shown like a lot of initiative. You took, as club president, you've done a lot for your club. Like you've even mentioned that you tried to start your own lower school Certamen team. I was wondering like how you went about that and the process of it.
It wasn't, my school isn't really that formally divided into upper and lower school, but I was definitely trying to generate interest among younger students, which was difficult because my school had, at the start of my senior year, they had announced the phasing out of their Latin program. So I was working with some of the kids who had been in advanced Latin classes, but there was always this sort of question hanging over everything, like what will happen once the Latin class is actually phased out. And I put up a last stand against that. I tried to recruit people, and I had a younger student come to SCRAM. I had recruited, this sounds very big, I had recruited more Marlboro students than had ever signed up than had ever attended a state convention before. I had recruited that many. It was 5 people. We were ready to go to state, and then obviously COVID happened, so that didn't end up happening. But I'd been excited to introduce people. I started using Kahoots to introduce them to this sort of questions, and then I was starting to print out novice Certamen sheets and just have people like say buzz, or because I don't believe we have a Certamen machine. But yeah, it was going well, and then hopefully my successor tries to continue it, but I don't know if she's ever been to the JCL, so we will try.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really sad. Obviously, that convention was canceled and that Marlboro cut Latin, but I think that your efforts are really impressive. I mean, do you have any like takeaways or advice into increasing engagement in the JCL even without Latin class?
For the JCL as a whole, I think that I don't know. I'm not sure how much the JCL could have done in the case of my school, but I do wish that it sometimes felt like a bit of a vox clamantis in deserto situation where I was like I published something in my school newspaper, like, please don't get rid of Latin. Here's all the reasons why you should not get rid of Latin. Like, I spoke to the prominent figures in the world language department. I used some JCL promotional materials, but I think that, and again, I am not the first vice president, so I do not know how concerted their public relations campaign is, but I always felt like my school didn't, outside the Latin department, didn't quite understand the importance of classics. So more focus on outreach, spreading that would be very helpful, maybe to individual schools, especially because I know a lot of schools in my area have phased out or sometimes consider phasing out Latin, which is obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think that lots of schools, even in Ohio, have kind of faced that where they're not really exiting the JCL, but they have, decreasing attendance year by year. And do you think that there's like a way for, I don't know, I guess maybe schools to come together or states to come together to try and sort of maintain that enthusiasm? Or, I mean, I guess that's kind of a difficult question because it hasn't happened that much besides like nationals, but do you think that there's like any prospect for that?
I mean, nationals, of course. I think that it's very interesting that we now have this virtual format that we've been forced to use because of the pandemic. And I wonder if that will lead to more virtual tournaments even once we're allowed to meet in person, because I think it's much easier to begin to engage with something if you can do it from your living room instead of having to, as like we sometimes would, leave the house at 6 a.m. to drive to a convention, to a regional convention 2 hours away, or like all fly up to a state convention situation. So I think that I do not know, but one thing that might be interesting to try out would be to use these pandemic tools to generate interest in a more accessible way going forward.
Yeah, that's actually something that a lot of the guests so far have mentioned that, I mean, I know at least I experienced that, during regular times and regular nationals, I generally stuck to people from my state interaction wise. But this year, with the pandemic and, with like the Kurtaman mini league and everything that spawned after that, I was able to meet a lot of people from different states, like, Massachusetts and Texas and Wisconsin and other places like that. And I think that kind of ironically, this pandemic, this place that isolationist like disaster has kind of increased communication and bonding in some way in the JCL. And I think that that's really cool. And I kind of want to see how that progresses. So one question, like just after all of your exploits in the JCL, what are you doing now? Like, yeah, like what does your life look like?
Well, I am going to Yale University next year, but I'm taking gap year. So right now I'm looking for ways to fill it. I would like to travel. I would like to check out my grandfather's classics dictionary, but unfortunately it is in Spain, and I do not know when I can, when it will be legal to leave the country. So in the meantime, what I'm doing, aside from obviously applying for internships and stuff, is I am serving as the California Senior Classical League parliamentarian. So I got my Robert's Rules of Order, obviously. Love it. And I also I'm self-studying Attic Greek because that was not something that was not offered at my school. I also just enjoy self-studying languages. I went through an Icelandic phase once. This is, but it feels like a really nice way to stay engaged with classics, stay engaged with cool inflected grammar. And so
Yeah,
that's most of it.
I think that's amazing. I'm also self-studying Attic Greek right now, just for fun. I'm using Athenazde, the textbook.
Oh, I'm using Hansen and Quinn's.
Oh, I've heard people recommend that before, but I don't have a copy of it. I think it's really cool that you're getting involved in the SCL. What do you think that your future involvement in the JCL will look like? Do you think it'll be kind of more focused towards California, or maybe like more broad in the NJCL? I mean, I know the Yale Certamen scene, or like the Yale Certamen Club, is incredibly vast. And do you have plans to try and help out with that?
Absolutely. That was one of the things I think I wrote about that in my supplement. Like, I definitely want to start with the Yale Certamen. Sorry, my dog's barking in the other room. Yes, I would love to write questions for that. That seems like a very logical culmination of everything. Also, I just hope to pursue a classics heavy course, which is another way to keep the involvement going. I also, of course, will stay involved with SCL as much as I can.
Yeah, no, that's really cool, and I mean, it's nice to see, that like, you're still trying to like, do classics in some way and make sure you're involved in some way, even if you're not necessarily, taking a specific course at college. It's like, okay, look, I am in a classics class, therefore I'm still doing like you're doing self-involvement, and I don't think that's the most common, but I think it's cool to see. I'm glad to hear it, and I'm wondering, like, so I guess it's backtracking a little bit, but I did want to talk about this a bit more. So you mentioned your school is phased out Latin. You've also mentioned that some of the schools in your area have started to, like, or maybe not necessarily after your school did it, but like there's been general thought about phasing out Latin. And I mean, first of all, that's just very, very sad to hear, because I think Latin's probably the greatest class you can take in your, I guess, at any point in time, honestly. And I'm curious, like, do you know much about this is going to sound, I'll phrase it more specifically. Do you know much about the like state of Latin in California, which I guess is a state too? Like, do you know like kind of like how that is doing as a whole? Is it on a general decline? Do you know what that's like?
I don't know. I don't have figures off the top of my head. When I said schools in my area, I mean my school. I'm thinking of another girls' school that is nearby, and I know that many just don't offer it at all. One school that's doing, in my understanding, a pretty good job with it is Crossroads. So just shout out to them, keep the torch burning. But I can't speak to California very specifically, but I do know that when I asked one of the figures in my school who had defended the decision to phase out Latin, I asked him why, like what his thought process was, what his reasoning was, and he ended up telling me that apparently it's declining over the country. He was trying to go with the general trend of, like, he thought it was an investment worthy of, that made sense given the direction of classics in the country. And that made me very sad. That definitely made me want to fight harder to keep it going. And my school may be I hope my school is an anomaly. I hope that the trend can be reversed. I think that the pandemic may offer, again, maybe we can become more digitally savvy with advertising. We can, yeah. But I know that the JCL is an incredible experience, obviously. And I think that if many people were introduced to it, they would feel the same way as we all do. So it's a matter of exposure.
Yeah, I think that's for sure. I do think that I think Latin is slowly but steadily kind of declining, just because it's an ancient language. Everyone's like, it's dead. What can you do with it?
It's wrong. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, I personally am like, oh, we need more Latin in this country, not less. But yeah, that's sad to hear. I mean, I think, you mentioned Crossroads, and I'm hoping more schools in California are kind of holding to that kind of like, let's keep Latin going, let's keep Latin alive. Maybe not in the speaking sense, but like, I guess one thing for me that I want to also talk about, and it's a bit of a jump, but it's just something that came to mind, is do you think there's enough like support in terms of resources and stuff at the national level in regards to California? Because like I know like for example, Texas has like a couple like former state chairs, former national chairs that like were super involved. So they like they independently come and like try to keep things going, and they develop a bunch of stuff. And do you think the national scene is helping out enough with California and maybe just smaller states in general?
I quite honestly do not know about that. I know that California has very high JCL involvement in terms of like our delegations, our state conventions are fairly large compared to other states, I believe. But frankly, I've never served on the JCL board. I'm only getting involved with the board as an SCLer, so I honestly don't know.
That's fine. I mean, you don't have to have like, oh, I have the answer to everything. I was just curious because like a big conversation that I think has come up even more and more now that we're in the pandemic and people have time to like think about the state of the JCL. Where is everyone? How are other states doing? Is like kind of this discussion of like, is there any way we can help other states? Because we're online now. So like we can host these tournaments that anyone from across the country can come to, barring, maybe like a 2-hour or 3-hour time zone difference. But like pretty much anyone from across the country can play. And I think that's probably one of the biggest benefits of the pandemic in a weird way, is just, as I think Alan mentioned earlier, the interconnectedness of the JCL is higher than ever, I think. I don't think before this I knew pretty much anyone outside of Texas. Like I knew names, but like I didn't know people, But yeah, that's super neat. And I'm wondering, like, did you personally have that type of experience with it going online? You were like, this is like a super, like, I mean, I guess not an entirely positive because everyone wants to be in person, but like, did you find it as like a good experience kind of?
Yeah, I did. I of course there's the disappointment of it not being in person, but I definitely feel like I got to, because everyone was kind of, you could see all the tiles in a Zoom call are pretty even, so you can see everyone's names. It's easier to think, oh, that's a name I've heard. That's a person I've heard about. Here's that person. Oh my goodness, I'm playing an Nikhil round with them. That kind of situation is definitely more allowed for. I felt also that way with Michael Kearney's Kurtaman Mini League. It really helped put faces, or at least voices, to names. And I did enjoy, I ended up, as a result of that, getting on the Discord Kurtaminatores chat, which was very fun. I didn't realize how often people scrimmed. It's very fun. So that was definitely a cool way to become more connected with it, because again, like you seem to have experienced, I also was very involved with my state chapter. I still love fellowship, but it definitely was easier on the virtual platform to get more involved with other people from other states.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways from going online, is just like the weird chance that coincidentally we are now all closer than we were before, which I think is probably very healthy for the JCL, because I think like all the East Coast college Kurtamina, for example, were pretty much like East Coast exclusive unless you wanted to pay like a massive plane ticket to fly up there. So I think a lot of accessibility has occurred. So yeah, with that, I just kind of wanted to ask, like, this is, I guess, a bit cheesy, but is there any like, experience or like advice that you'd wish you had been like told about or kind of given as like coming into the JCL that you would like to share with others? And it doesn't have to be like, oh, buzz faster or something, just whatever, like you're like, this is like kind of like a takeaway I had.
Takeaway I had? I'm gonna think about that for a second. I definitely enjoyed the learning. The process of learning all the lessons I learned in JCL was very fun in and of itself. So I wouldn't want to spoil anything for people just starting. I would say one of the things is definitely embrace the community aspect. When you come in and there are people dressed like centurions and there are kazoos everywhere, I was a little bit like, what is this? And obviously by junior year, I was kazooing with the best of them. So sorry.
It's fine.
There's a mailman. My audio doesn't stand a chance. 1 second. Okay, he's running away. There we go. In terms of advice I would give someone else, just a bit of practical advice. Source books exist. That took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out, and I managed to meet with success without them, but it is easier with them. Is definitely something it's definitely something I would like to tell my younger self, because I imagine most people do learn that early on. I think use the resources that are available to you because they are very good, and embrace the community aspect.
Yeah, I think those are great takeaways. There's been big discussion about sourcebook access and how it is a financial barrier in of its own to compete, to obtain not necessarily a certain amount of knowledge, because you've proven that you can do it without the source books, but it's it helps so much because now you have what are the question writers writing from, and that changes the game entirely. The community aspect, I think, is a very big thing that I not embraced for a while, but I think eventually it was something I was this is you see the people blasting the kazoos, you see the people dressed up as all these ancient Romans, and you're what is happening? These people are the weirdest people I've met. And then you realize they're also the most enjoyable people you will get to meet because they just love classics as much as you. And with that, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts and your advice and, just everything. It's been a blast having you on. I enjoyed hearing your story and, learning about your thoughts and perspectives and how California is. And with that, that's pretty much everything from me. Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
It's fun.
Take care.
All right. Thanks.